This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm somewhat more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill. This morning we interviewed Chad Tucker from Acorn Capital Solutions. Chad has been on the show before, but today we dove more into his asset management and acquisitions over the last year. Bill, what did you take away from it?
I love Chad, and he was the first person I met in the Jake and Gino mentorship community a little over a year and a half ago, and he's always been there to help. And at this point, we call him, he calls us, and we're really able to help each other, solve small challenges, big challenges. I don't want to say seamlessly, but we certainly are able to help each other out on a weekly, monthly basis.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about, helping each other. And that's what we talked about during the episode. We first interviewed Chad on the 22nd episode of Collecting Real Estate. So if you want to hear more about his background, his story, how he got into real estate, check that episode out. This one, like I said, it's more about what he's been doing for the last year. And I think this is the first time we've interviewed someone where I didn't take any notes, because these were just genuine questions that I had for Chad, because he's someone that we consider a friend. There's a lot of parallels between what he's doing, what we're doing, and I haven't had the time or the opportunity to speak with him in a while. So these are all questions that I've had on top of my mind on how are you handling your asset management? How are you handling your acquisitions? And it might not be the most exciting conversation. It's not the flashy, big number, fun discussions, but it's the real stuff that we get into today.
Well, here's what I have to point out with Chad. He's got 4 kids, a beautiful wife, and he's had this job for 20 years. As he described it, it's blue collar prison. So it's a great job. It supports his family. But once you get that entrenched into that type of situation with your job and family, please take note of that, because he has just set a goal. He's leaving that job in a year and a half, and that's huge.
And a lot of individuals get into real estate investing to leave that job, that 9 to 5 that they have. Chad's been doing this for about 2 years, and he will be out of that 9 to 5 in about another 2 years. So if that's something that you're interested in, listen to this one. Listen to the first interview with Chad, and if you follow in his footsteps, you'll be able to have the same result. Chad Tucker from Acorn Capital. Really excited to have you back on the show. Chad has had a very exciting year, a lot of growth. He's an expert in asset management and acquisitions for commercial real estate, collecting the types of assets that we like here. Chad, how are you?
Good, man. I'm glad to be back on with 2 of my favorite people. It was an honor to get asked back, especially after the high-profile people you guys have been getting on lately.
You fit right in with the group. Tell us about your past year and the growth that you've had.
I don't even remember what episode it was I was on. It was a while ago, but a lot's happening here. So last December, I closed on my first 16-unit in Gainesville. It was a great deal that we can go into more detail about. And then about 6 months later, I closed on another 24 units. That was a great deal outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, that we're starting the stabilizing process on now. So it's been great. A little bit about myself. I live in Orlando, Central Florida. I'm a full-time real estate investor in the multifamily, but also full-time firefighter, full-time dad of 4, and husband, and all that other cool stuff that keeps you busy. But it's been a fun journey this last year, to say the least, and it's kind of eye-opening. Every single step along the way in the journey, you learn something new.
Yes, we've got to know Chad very, very well, Steve. And Chad, thank you for being on again. And I think it's been a little over a year and a half since we met, but I feel like we've been friends for many years. So I appreciate everything you've done for us along the way. And I am really impressed by what you've done lately as far as getting Palmetto, I'm not going to say fully repositioned, but we're way ahead of schedule on that asset, and also on a good start to that other deal that you are involved in and leading in Tennessee. I'd like for you to discuss a bit now that we're right in the middle of operations on a couple nice deals, but you still have to find new deals. Still have to find that next property. What's that sweet spot now? Operating close to 50 units, but finding that next deal.
I mean, it's easy, right? Like everyone does it. You just like, write a little thing and they send you a postcard. But I mean, I think what you have to realize in this business is it's constantly adding stuff to the hopper. Kind of like Jake and Gino say with the conveyor belt method. You have to constantly be looking for that next deal and networking. So like for me on the acquisition side, there's only a couple of key things that I look at. I have to talk to brokers and sellers. I have to underwrite deals. I have to write offers, and I have to follow up on offers and close them. That's it. Like that's acquisitions. It's not hard. You don't have to do anything fancy, but you have to consistently do it. And you're going to kiss a lot of ugly frogs before you find that prince. And it kind of stinks because like you find these deals that you're like, oh, this is a great deal, but you're off just a little on price. Well, it's not your deal. I think what's helped me is now that we have 16 units in Gainesville that you partnered on, Bill, and invested in us with capital, but also our Tennessee deal is I've gotten a lot more strict on if I'm going to go outside of like a certain sphere of my buy criteria, it has to be like home run, grand slam kind of deal. If it's not, because it's one thing I learned from you early on, Bill, was it has to fit my lifestyle, my ROE, like my return on effort. So, like, I have a deal in Gainesville. If I get a decent deal in Gainesville, that's going to be a better priority than a decent marginal deal on the Space Coast, which is 2 hours in the opposite direction for me.
I think it's a great question, Bill, on how do you manage a portfolio when you get to that size and also focus on the next one. It's something I'm struggling with right now, trying to keep everything neat and organized and also focus on the next one because that's what we need to do to grow. Chad, how long have you been doing this?
Coming up on 2 years here. I think November. I can't remember. Somewhere around then is when I met Bill and I started down this crazy journey with Jake and Gino. So I'm coming up on 2 years with 40 units and $4 million under asset. But honestly, that only happened in 6 months.
It's so impressive. A lot of people that aren't in this industry, they hear 40 units, $4 million, and they don't understand how that can be done in 2 years. And a lot of it comes back to having a team, not doing it alone. And I like that you use that word consistency because that's what it's going to take for both the acquisitions and the asset management side. It takes that daily consistency for both. Are those the two roles that you're mostly focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can raise capital if I want to, but it's like anything else. You have a span of control, and there's only so much you can do, right? So at the end of the day, my biggest value add that I enjoy, that is kind of like my sole purpose that I enjoy, is the buying of the property and running it. And my company, Acorn Capital, I've solidified over the last year, like, what do I want? What's my long-term vision? And like, one of the biggest things that really strikes me is I want to transform lives through real estate. And, you say that and it's very broad and vague, but that's the whole reason of a vision, right? But my vision is not, I make my partners a lot of money and I make me a lot of money. I work with good property managers. I work with good contractors. I pay them a decent wage. I take care of them and they take care of me. We have good tenants that we take care of and we help them as well.
And boy, is that key. When you're operating these assets and you have that great property manager and also the contractors, a lot of times the property manager is the contractor, or they're finding subs, or sometimes the asset manager is finding the subs. Tell us more about that, the importance of how hard or easy, I know you want to say easy, it's not easy, but how challenging is the job if that property manager and your contractors aren't necessarily following your business plan?
I mean, nothing's easy, but I think you got to vet the right people, right? So, like, I have good property managers, but you have to understand everyone has a life, right? Like, I have 16 units, they manage thousands of units. So, I understand they're not going to have the same focus that I will because it's my 16 units, right? But I think what I've learned with some of the struggles I've had recently is like I need to set my expectations really strong and reiterate that over and over and over, constantly to where they're like, yeah, we know. You know what I mean? And same way with your performance indicators, right? Like certain things that are becoming more of a non-negotiable for me that we're doing on our weekly calls is like one of the things that I look at is delinquencies because if you're not paying, like I can't help more people. I look at who's coming up for renewal and lease up. I look at other things like that as well. But then one of the biggest things I'm learning is where are we at on our vacancies? Like how long are we down? And if we're down more than like where I think is acceptable, 15, 7 days, why? Why? You know what I mean? Because they get busy. They have a life. They have other properties. So it's just being that squeaky wheel.
Such a good timing for the call. Bill and I are having these same discussions in our office. It seems like every day right now. I have a number of units that I manage myself. I'm trying to get a manager for. I have units with Bill that we do have a manager for. And then when it comes to work, the manager does some subcontracting. We have other contractors helping with things. And it's trying to manage all these different peoples to get that desired outcome that we're all looking for. You have a property manager for each one of your buildings, right?
Yeah, so they're in 2 different locations. My life's about simplicity, right? So if I keep everything in this region and my manager can manage this region, like one person to talk to is way better. But my other property is in Knoxville, so I have a great property manager up there. But yeah, I have 2 different property managers over both of them.
Well, what was the process like for vetting these managers? Because I'm sure that after you had some experience with the first one, you went into finding that second manager with a different lens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that like both of them, like you learn that people have strengths and weaknesses, right? So at the end of the day, like where's my strength and where do I need weaknesses to come in? My strength is like looking at numbers, overseeing stuff like the high margin stuff, right? And if I have to, I can do the construction management stuff, especially if it's local. I need someone that's going to be a good lease up, a good steward to my residents, communicating with them, taking care of them on that, taking care of work orders in a timely, quick manner because I want to provide a higher level of service. So those are like key things for me. Like if you're personable and I can talk to you and I really get along, my residents are going to have the same thing. If you have the right attitude of like, we had a tenant, we didn't meet our goal of moving in on time. Well, they were supposed to move in on the 15th, they moved in on the 19th. I told the property manager, we're not charging them for the rest of the month. We're not going to prorate them. You know what I mean? They were kind enough to work with us and stick it out. So it was the right thing. And she sees that that's how I operate. Like, let's make them happy, but do the right thing as well. Because we didn't follow through on our word. And that's the biggest thing is you got to find someone you like and that has the strengths in the areas that you have. Weaknesses in.
And that's underrated right there. Being a manager for so many years, it took me a good amount of time because I started in my 20s and all I focused on at that point was collecting rent and having high occupancy. And then some time goes by and you really have to reflect. I need to do this professionally. The tenants are our customers. And I appreciate what you said there with a tenant who's scheduled to move on the 15th, but they didn't get in on the 19th. It wasn't their fault. And it's so key to smooth out that small error, I guess we can say, because we have to start off that relationship correctly and professionally. We have a 1-year contract with that tenant. And what I have learned a lot of times is a lot of tenants will determine if they're going to renew their lease in a year based on their first month at that property.
I think what happens a lot of time, and it's really easy in this industry, especially if you're not truly, like for me, when I isolated and got really strict on my vision of transforming lives, including our residents, right? Like not just mine, like I'm not looking to fly around on a jet. So if I got to take a little less margin to make our residents happy, that's fine, as long as they're doing their part of the deal. But I think people forget to put yourself in that position. Like, I remember when me and my wife had $50 to our name after bills were late, right? Like, and it's not a fun spot to be in. So like you have some tenants that are struggling to pay rent. Like, I'll kick them out. No, that's, hey, okay, so she's paying us on the 15th or 18th. Let's see if we can give her assistance for a month to get her head above water because she's trying. But at the end of the day, it's really hard because I have to separate myself, right, with a property manager. I know personally I would have a bleeding heart, but then I'd be out of business. So I have to have a property manager like help buffer me. But at the same time, I want to do right by the tenant and be empathetic, long as they're doing their part, right? Like, if you're paying on time, you're communicating with us, and working with us, like, we're going to do everything we can to help you as well.
When it comes to that property manager who is supposed to have these aligned interests with you, but it's difficult because they have their own life and they have X number of units beyond yours. Do you find that they usually have systems that you're okay with and you let them run their own business, or are you trying to integrate your own beliefs, your own systems into how they operate?
I mean, you don't go to Chick-fil-A or Chili's or whatever and say, I don't like your ordering system. I don't like your POS. I don't like who you use to clean the ovens, right? Like, it's just not how it works, right? You have influence, but like, I'm 16. They have thousands of units. So my influence is less than the guy that has thousands of units with them. But I think what's really big, especially like you said in the beginning, when you vet them, you start to learn like what things you need. Like, one of the things that like really appealed to me about our Tennessee property manager, Katie at Freedom Investment Group, is she's invested a lot in the last 6 months in systems and processes and automation, right? So that was like a big aha to me, because like that's something that I realized moving forward in any business, especially in real estate, you have to do, because there's only so much you forget stuff. So by having that stuff automated and built in, like it helps limit that, right? So that was a big draw to her. My other company, they have policies and procedures, but like they went through a big change up recently with the management in my region. So I understand and I'm empathetic because I know the owners and I know the regional oversight, and we talk and they want to do right by me, but I'm empathetic they're going through some growing pains as well. So like I tell them, we're going through growing pains together. We'll figure it out, as long as it doesn't cost me and my investors, my residents, too much.
Yeah, people get busy, especially the property managers. They get busy, busy, busy. When it rains, it pours, and then it becomes difficult. And then transparency, I think, is so key. And we don't get surprised as asset managers and owners. And then the conversation is had to regroup and get back on that same page, because it can get expensive. We don't like vacancy because people got too busy, or we don't like vacancy because they haven't been able to work on a unit. And when there is a challenge, we need to anticipate that challenge, talk about it, and come up with the solution before it becomes a problem. What I'd like to talk about is we underwrite deals. And those are projections, assumptions, and that's how we get into properties that we get excited about. And I know that there's some differences with the Palmetto deal and then the Knoxville deal with that repositioning process. They're both massive rent growth deals, but sometimes you can approach properties much more aggressively than others for different factors, whether it be proof of concept on getting a certain market rent or financing that we might have in place. Can you talk about the differences on those properties, on how aggressive or conservative we chose to be?
Yeah, I mean, so they both have month-to-month tenants. So it's a good and a bad evil, right? So you have a lot of month-to-month, it allows you to execute really quick your business plan. If you have a lot of month-to-month, they can also all leave really quick, but it also limits your lending requirements because it's unstable debt to them. So when you look at it, like, The Knoxville deal was a newer property. Like most of the units are 2006 to 2018. So they're great units, they're good size. The downfall is the market it's in is a sub-market of Knoxville. So it's a smaller market. So yes, you might have a great product, but there's only so many people. So we priced it under what some of the Class A's are, and we priced it above the Class B's because we're a B, and we just put it on the market to see. And then we kind of tweaked some stuff, and we weren't getting the response we wanted. We came down a little. And then once we started to get to that point that we're like, okay, we think this is what the market's telling us we can lease for, now we send out renewal notices to everyone else. And credit 100% to our property manager, we sent out notices to half the residents in 1 month, which sounds crazy, but we're leaking them up. Basically, we did a lottery system. We sent it out to people. They're getting a good like $200 rent bump. So I understand, right? And we gave them plenty of notice, but we gave them a lottery. And we said, hey, if you want your rent to be for 12 months, you sign early and you get to pick. If you want your rent to be 7 months, you sign early, you get to pick 7 months. But there's only so many months to have so many people. And that allows us to stretch out our renewals for next year. You don't want them all coming up in the same month. But it allows, if you are serious about wanting to stay long term, you're going to sign as early as possible to get that 12 months. If you like on the fence and you want a shorter one, you sign. But it gave the occupants a choice in the matter. And 11 out of 11 signed up that month. And we have another 7 going out this month. And I think we're offering a quality deal that they're going to sign up. Gainesville is a different deal. Like Gainesville, the owner was a great person, but he was a self-manager. Deferred maintenance was deferred maintenance, and if it wasn't needed, he didn't put the investment back into it for like new kitchens and stuff like that. So like we're doing like almost full turns on these things. So now you got to manage contractors. Now you got to manage how long does that take? Can you get supplies in? So that's been a huge learning curve for me, because unlike Knoxville, we didn't renew as many people that I was expecting. So the business plan went a little south. Good news is we're able to get way higher rents, which is still below market for that area, which is offsetting the extra cost that we're having to put into this deal.
It's a great twofold there. On one side, you're more aggressive and you have the flight, so you have the high vacancy, but then you can get that higher rent in return. The other side, a little more cautious. You turn them over one at a time, or you get the renewals. I like that lottery system. I don't think I've heard it called that before, but just making sure that your tenants leaving are spread out. You're not having a large flight in 1 month.
I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't understand is like my job as an asset manager is not to harp on you about numbers, right? Like my job is to make sure we're thinking next year on renewals. So like we're doing the investment in the property to make the renewals. Like we put, instead of carpet upstairs, we'll put laminate. And some people are like, my whole thing is now a turn of having to replace carpet for a day and paint for a day. It's now touch up paint and we're back the next day on the market. So now I cut another day at, let's say, $1,300 a month rent, which is close to what we're getting. That's $40 on this day times 24 units. Like it starts to add up by investing and holding these things long term too.
Absolutely. I think your job as a manager is to have that bigger vision, that long-term plan. And that's going to be different for every property. Some are more aggressive than others. Bill and I have the syndication together that we were able to be not so aggressive. To get to market rent was 40% increases, but we were only increasing about 10% for the residents that were already there, just because we didn't want that large flight and we knew that would have the numbers work, and we had turnovers to get to our 1 year projection goals early, and that worked. Compared to the 24 unit I'm working on right now, I had debt that I have to refinance soon, and I went in there and I raised rents 30% because I knew people would leave, but I knew what number I had to get to in what amount of time. And that's your job, to have that long-term vision and be able to execute on a daily and monthly basis to get to that ultimate goal. You mentioned experiencing growing pains. I think it was with your Gainesville management company. We see that all the time with management companies. It's very easy to take on units, and then it's not so easy to manage those units. Can you tell us about what you experienced overseeing those growing pains?
Yeah. So, I mean, in full transparency, they lost a decent amount, and they lost their head regional over this region because they have several regionals in the company. They're a great company, and I'm still good friends with them, but they had to hire new people. So now we got to train new people. Now you got to get the culture, which they have a great culture in their company, but they're trying to figure out everything too. So that's the growing pain they were going through. It's not like they put on a ton of units and they didn't give me the attention that they needed. It's just a new employee learning who's, how, when, what to do with the processes and systems they have internally. But what happens is maybe they get overwhelmed, and as a new employee, you're afraid to ask for help. And then, you get downtime longer than I would want because they're trying to do something else to stay off the radar and be that good new employee. And, we had a couple of things, and at the end of the day, like, I sat down and I look at it as the guy has strengths in areas that we need 100%. He's leasing up like crazy. He does really good with that. He's doing really good with talking with the customers. Those are key things I want from my property manager, right? The stuff he's dropping the ball on is stuff that they're doing for me that maybe I could take off their plate. And we're close. Like, the other thing too is like where you're at in your curve of your business plan. Like, when you're in stabilization mode and you're trying to turn, like, if you have the debt that you got to get off the books, or you have this or whatever, it's a lot more intensive for them, right? Like, it's a lot more work for the property manager. But once I stabilize it, like, now it's, when's our renewals? What's the market rent? How are we looking? Are we taking care of work orders? That's it. Like, it's a 10, 15-minute conversation. So I'm like, okay, we just got to get through this month, because at this month, I project we'll be stabilized.
And me and Stephen were talking about this a bit before you came on. You're going to have two different styles. First year, okay, you just hire a property manager. All right, we're leading, setting the expectation, because we are now beginning the reposition of this process. But after 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, you have to align, understanding that you have the similar core values and we're in line on that business plan. And then after a year, we're partially repositioned. And then that second year, everything is going great. We're on track. But now we're staring at that rent roll once again on a half repositioned or mostly repositioned. And now the management gets a bit different because we're more stabilized. We are now going to be less comfortable with having units going down because they don't need so much work. So I appreciate what you had mentioned on making good choices with the construction. We don't like a lot of carpet. We like solid surface flooring because we want someone who's moving out where that unit's not going down at all. Someone's moving in a couple days after that move out.
And if you invest right in your property, it makes your property manager's job easier, which if the job's easier, they're more happy to take on the other issues that come up, because there's always going to be other issues. I think one of the biggest things is in this journey that I've had is you have to surround yourself around great people. I know I've called you up with some frustration bills on asset management, given your experience, but I know my good buddy Ken that I talk about all the time down here with Acorn Capital, and he gave me this like nugget that I wasn't even thinking about, because I'm not there yet, but I'm about to be there with stabilizing. He's like, look, when you're stabilizing a property, he's like, you do what you have to do the right thing. He's like, sometimes budgets go over, sometimes they go under, sometimes, just stuff happens and you work through the stuff. He goes, but once you stabilize it, he goes, you have to get granular with your expenses. You have to lock down all your spending. And it's not like you're not investing in your property, but like when something minor happens in stabilization, we're trying to get to where we're getting. Okay, buy a new sign, buy this. Okay, the lawn guy quit, get a new lawn guy. You know what I mean? When you get into the next phase, I'm not raising my rent anymore. Like I am now, because I've already absorbed that. He's like, you have no way to increase your income because you're locked into 12-month leases, but your expenses will get out of hand if you don't sell. So I've literally considered almost two phases for me. Like there's stabilization where you do what you do and you try and hit your business plan and all. But once you get to stabilize, like, it's a whole nother business plan. Now my focus is on renewal, downtime, saving costs, cut costs, but by adding value as well.
And high occupancy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two folds. I mean, like I said, I'm newer in this journey, but like I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Like if you renew people at a lower rate and you keep them, there's lost income, right? And that lost income over time just gets greater and greater. So like you have to play that fine balance between the two worlds too, because the lost income for you limits you as an investor from helping your investors, which you have a fiduciary responsibility, but also everything else.
Yeah, I got to jump in on that one more time. And to not allow management to get used to having units going down, to that repositioning stage. When a tenant moves out, we got to do a bathroom. Okay, it's obvious that we got to go 30 days down. But once we are stabilized or partially stabilized, it's okay. Here's the conversation now. It's a different perspective. Let's not get in a routine of thinking we can just have a unit down for a month. That's unacceptable.
And that's where you come in as an asset manager. If you're truly going to be an asset manager, right? Like I said, they don't see the same thing we do as owners. So like their job is to lease it up and all. But like for me, I'm looking 120 days out. 120 days out, I'm like, okay, who do we have coming up? 90 days out. Have you been in that unit in the last 30 days? Are they a good tenant? We're evaluating the tenant. 60 days out, what are we going to charge the tenant? 30 days out, we send the renewal, and we already have a business plan on if they leave, what are we doing to turn it? Like, I want to have supplies, if I got to do floors and all, here waiting the day they leave. I want the trash out guy there waiting the day they leave. And it's to cut down that time. But when you got tons of other projects going on, the exterior and lease ups and all of those, it's kind of hard. But if you structure it right by spreading out your leases and doing everything else, you're only doing a handful of those a month. And most of those are going to renew if you do your job right.
Chad, I think you need a new office, man.
So the people that know me understand this 100%. I have 4 kids, and my little guy had strep throat yesterday while I was at the firehouse. So he's here running amok, destroying my house while I'm doing this. So if you guys hear that in the background, this is real life. Like, I do this to deal with my kids, right? Like, me and Bill have talked about this time and time again. And if I can't create this life that allows me to deal with my kids, like my property managers, when I'm on my cadence calls, if this happens, they understand 100%. They have kids too. And I'm understanding of them when they have, like, I've had some call me and go, hey, I can't make this because I have to do this with my kids. They know not to hide it from me because I'm understanding.
I love the transparency there. This is real life. You go to those meetups and it's, we buy a building, we raise rents, we refi, and now we're rich. It's so easy. Real life is you got the kids running around. You got the firefighter phone going off. You have a flood going on in a basement. That's real life. There's a lot.
It is. And I'm learning as I go too. Like there's days, and as I'm doing stuff, like I can cut stuff out and change stuff up, but like I'm not at that point right now. But I have that vision for my business as well, where okay, who's going to take on these roles? Who's going to do this? What can I outsource? But unfortunately, the business is not there yet. Because I want to be able to just hang out with him while he's sick today.
Exactly. And the point that you do this for your kids is so strong. I have to remind myself sometimes that cause I've been getting, frustrated or irritated the day in, day out recently with all the construction and tenants who are getting mad at you. Meanwhile, they're not paying. They're 2 months behind in rent and they're sending you these nasty messages. And then there's so many things that can set you off every single day. But then taking that deep breath and reminding yourself, well, I do this for a certain lifestyle. And if I'm getting angry every day, then it's not worth it at all. And that's important to remind yourself. I'm curious how you expanded into Tennessee, how you got interested in that market and how you found that new property. I've been focusing on upstate New York and Tampa, Florida. And it seems like just focusing on 2 markets is a lot on its own. How did you find that second market and what was the story there?
So I have one market, like in my head, like 100%. I'm a 2-hour radius of Orlando. I had acquisition and asset management in this area. I'm very big on the E criteria, 150 less, value add through operations. That's it. Like, if anything fits that criteria, but it's not here, I don't like it because it doesn't fit the life I want to create. But what happens in this business is you start getting around other people and they value what you bring to the table. one of the partners that me and Bill have on this deal, his name's Matt Dunn, with Right Move Properties. He owns a short term up there. And if you're in any of these markets, you have a secondary market that you're like, oh, that would be nice, but only if the stars align, right? So mine is the Panhandle because I was born and raised there. I know the market. Matt has the short term in Tennessee, so he was looking up there and he goes, he's underwriting it. He knows my strengths on underwriting. He's like, this actually looks like a good deal, and they want us to close it in 30 days. I was like, okay, 30-day closing. But I underwrote it, and I was like, nah. So I took all the underwriting apart, and I underwrote it again. And I was like, this is, even if we screw up, this is a good deal. Like, and I was like, okay, so what's it fit? It's a good new build. It's in a good market. It's tons of other stuff, but it's not in Central Florida. So then what was my other issues that had to go through my head? Like, why don't I want this? And I said, okay, well, I got to close in 30 days. Is that feasible without screwing me and my investors? Can we perform a business plan, and can we find a good property manager? Those are the big things that I had to figure out. And I called Matt up and I said, look, 1, 2, 3, I'm in. I have this much in my bank account. I'm your partner on this deal because it's like, it's a unicorn. It's too stupid of a deal to turn away. And we went to work. Like within 24 hours, I had an answer to every one of those 3 questions. I found a property manager through references and other people. I had a couple of lenders, but I called one that does bridge loans and some other loans, and we're paying a higher rate, but we didn't have to get an appraisal. And he's like, I can do this in 2 weeks. And then he's like, I've done it for this, and he gave me references. So like, I knew it can get done, right? So then it was like, okay, where do I go find the money? I go start talking to people, and all that's lining up within 24 to 48 hours. We locked the deal down. Within a week, we're fully funded, and we're closing. And I mean, to put it in simple, it's a unicorn because it's a new build. The guy ground up developed it, sold it to us. It's in a small market, yes, but like even if we don't hit halfway to our rent, we're going to get 25% return on our money in 4 years with no refi.
And very cliche, risk versus reward. And I realized that when you presented that deal, knowing that you had to close in 30 days, this is a multi-million-dollar deal. 30-day closing? I did those early in my career. Boy, talk about high anxiety coming up with, it doesn't matter if it's cash or how you come up with it. 30 days is very, very difficult to do that. But those returns
made it worth it.
The projections were fantastic. So different risk profiles for different people. And I was willing to take that gamble because you had it all laid out. You knew how to get the 30-day money, and we know how we're going to get the refi after 6 or 8 months because you're confident in that business plan.
I think the thing too is like all of the people that put in money besides me and Matt were not at risk until we closed. Like their money was not at risk. So I had $50,000. My partner Matt had $50,000 at risk. So I felt better taking the risk because I wasn't asking Bill or or Martin to put their money at risk until we closed. And then they're betting on me and my action plan. I would have lost my money at closing if we didn't close. So I wasn't asking my investors to take that risk.
Let me ask you this. I want to get back to acquisitions very quickly before we wrap this up. Knowing that you're in Central Florida, we all 3 of us love that Tampa area. And you've talked about different pockets in between Orlando and Tampa and Gainesville. And what are you seeing now when you're underwriting new deals? Do you see where there might be a glimmer of more opportunity, or what type of uncertainty? What's your feeling of that market at this point?
I mean, a deal for me is not always a deal for someone else. But right now, I honestly feel, and this is across all markets, right? Not just here, but I feel like it's almost like the old Wild West shootout, right? Like you have us as investors going, your prices are too high, you need to adjust because our rates and this and and we're talking ourselves out of a deal. You have the seller on the other side going, well, last week it was worth 180 a door. Now it's worth 200 a door. Buy it or not, I don't care because I bought it at 30 a door, right? So it's almost like a standoff between the two. I think if you could find a way to bridge that gap closer, you can get good deals because they're staying on the market longer. I haven't found that yet, but the spread between the two is big, right? Like the good news is you could list something and it would sell in Florida. Now deals are waiting for 6 months and going to another broker because they're not selling. So I think there's some operators that used to got saved by the market that are hurting. And then there's some buyers, like not me, but some buyers sitting on the sideline going, well, I don't know about interest rates. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. What if the market crashes? And they're waiting for a what if. The right time to buy a property is when it's the right time and it's your property and it's your deal. It doesn't matter the market cycle, anything. Just understand that when you buy it, you have to buy it with a plan for that cycle and all the other cool logistics behind it to operate it. And marginalize your risk, right? Like, I'm not going to take in a gut job right now. I don't want to deal with contractors, one, but like, it's just too much of a risk to reposition it in this cycle because I don't know what's going to happen.
That's why I like that Tennessee deal. I consider that close to Class A as you can get based on it being a newer asset, and the rents were just so under market value in that area. Has had so much rent growth, and I don't want to say still more rent growth to come, but those were so under market value that we just need to get them to market, and that's a grand slam deal.
He wasn't even getting rents for a Class C, right? Like, I don't think he valued what he had, and there's nothing wrong with valuing what you have.
Absolutely. Chad, we changed this up a little bit since the last time you were on, because this is the Collecting Real Estate podcast. They say you have to have 3 of something to make a collection. So number 1 question for you, in 5 words or less, what's the most important thing that you've learned since you started collecting real estate?
Consistency is key, and clarity. Consistency and clarity is key. They give you the ability to make decisions quick. They give you the ability to act on things that you probably wouldn't act on, and it gives you more opportunities to stuff. Because if you're consistently doing something, you're going to have more opportunities. If you're clear on your goals, your business plan, what you want, and you have everything else clear, it goes really quick, everything else.
I love that. It's just keeping it simple and consistent and knowing what you're shooting for. Second question for you. What are your 1 to 2 year personal goals?
So this is going to be the first time I've said it out loud on something like this, but the first quarter of 2024, I'm leaving the fire service. Like,
whoa,
yeah, it's something in the last 2-3 months I've had to wrap my head around, because when I went down this journey, I said, I'm going to leave, right? But I lied to myself over and over and over because I wasn't mentally ready. So like literally the last month I've talked to people, and I can leave now, but the risk is a little too great. I would have to come up with savings and take some more risks that I'm not personally ready for. But I've set a deadline for myself because I work good under pressure. And if I do that, I'm going to hit that goal of leaving. And what that looks like is maybe I double my unit count. I get up to 100 units between now and then. I have enough passive cash flow from that in order to pay my bills. And then it allows me to go to that next level of my career of building this business and focus on it full time.
And that's great. The one thing that just came to mind, appreciating you have a bigger family and you've worked for that. You've been in the fire business your entire adult life. And it's once again finding that balancing act, that sweet spot, not only on how aggressive or conservative we have to be on that asset we're repositioning. You're repositioning your life. So you have to find that balancing act of when is it right for your family, because there's also that as you discussed, that risk profile, and leaving too early, or in all reality, leaving your job too late. There's also that aspect.
So I'll probably leave too late when I leave, right? But like, I'm coming up on 20 years in the fire service. Like, I never saw anything different until a couple of years ago. And there's a mindset, like, it's almost like, I call it a blue collar prison, but like, I make very good. I enjoy what I do. I have great people, but it just doesn't get me to that next part of my life that I found I want to be at. But then on top of that, like when you're going through this, like you grow as a person, but like it's hard to get rid of the stuff that's gotten you here.
Love that. Love that. Last question for you, Chad. We appreciate you having you on today. How can we and the listeners assist you? How do we contact you?
So I'll put it out. I put it out all the time, and I'm 100% serious about it. I know Bill and Steven have taken me up on it. My cell phone's 850-206-4603. If I can help you with anything, just reach out. I'm on Facebook at Chad Tucker. I have a website now because I'm actually a big boy professional and figured I should do it. It's acorncapitalsolutions.com. If you want to invest in Central Florida, you can reach out to me. If you need help finding different things, I know Steven was looking for a lender one time, and I hooked him up with my buddy Daniel that took care of him on his deal. Like, that's the whole benefit of this whole industry is like, you're not alone. You're not an island. You have bad days. You have good days. Sometimes you have issues. And every single one of us want to see everyone succeed. And that's the great. And if you don't, then I don't work with you, so it's okay.
I called Chad and I said, Chad, I have 2 weeks to close on this deal. What do? I need help. And you're like, well, I just closed on a deal in 30 days. So you called the right guy.
But that's what happens in this business, man. Like, this is one of the deals that I've had, and it still baffles me that I talk to people like this, right? But like, to me, a couple of years ago, it didn't exist. But I called up and I was like, I want to show that I could pay the down payment. But like, who do I know? So I call up someone that's a mutual friend of Bill and mine, and I think you even know him, Steven. And I was like, I need to show like a lot of cash. And I know that you've had some refis. And he's like, yeah. He's like, how much do you need? I was like, I need to show like 700 G on a statement to be like, we can close this thing. Give us the deal. Like, because I wanted to show the seller, like, I'm not going to go raise the fund. This guy's got it. We're closing. We're done. Have a good day. He's like, does it have to be in one bank account? I was like, how are we having this conversation? Sends me a bank statement. I sent it to him. Unfortunately, we didn't win that deal. But man, like, the conversations you can have in this industry with people, and everyone wants to see you succeed. That's the biggest thing. And like, ask people for help and you'll be rewarded. I had a bad day. I called my buddy Ken. I called Bill, and they helped me through it. And that's all this is about.
Once again, Steven, relationships. You're able to call Chad. I think he gave you a little bit of insight when you were in that very anxiety-driven situation. It was great anxiety. You had a fantastic deal. You had to figure it out. But even if Chad's not necessarily going to help you with that lender because he's in Florida, we're in New York, just having that conversation with him saying, well, I just did it in 30 days, and there was some humor involved. You shed some light, but it gave you some comfort. And you're like, wow, okay, that was a great conversation. It's time for me to get to work and solve this challenge.
You said it was anxiety. It hasn't ended for that property yet. That's still ongoing.
I think what you forget too is like, none of this is revolutionary. Like, I'm not rewriting the will or redoing anything. Like, it is what it is, right? So at the end of the day, like, your problem of having to close in 2 weeks and my problem of 30 days have a lot of the same issues, right? Here's what I saw as issues, and here's what I ran into that you need to get ahead of. If I do a raise, who am I going to call? Someone who's done a raise on syndication. What do I need to do? Oh, you need to do, and here's what things that I do now to make me better. So learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely. And I didn't even end up using the lender that you suggested, the one that you had worked with.
Yeah.
But just having that conversation of, oh, that sounds like a good deal.
It's doable.
You'll be good. It's doable. Here's the steps you should take. Call me if you have any questions. That's so grounding, because when you're going through that process, you have that voice in the back of your head. Can I really do this? Can I really pull it off? And those conversations are huge.
And what's really cool is we're all in the same business. We're doing similar deals. We might be in New York, you're down south, but you and Steven just closed on deals that you had to do in a short period of time. You're both doing massive rent growth deals, racing to refi at some point, where you guys are at that same stage on two different deals where you're able to continue to share notes, learn from each other, so you can get to that next solution to that challenge that we might all be talking about in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
Who knows? But at the end of the day, you learn that. I think the other thing that's reassuring to me is like, you feel like when you go into these deals, you're alone, right? You're never alone. But like by Steven calling me, the little bit of aloneness I had, because I called Bill when I had that 30-day thing, and I was like, how am I going to close this in 30 days? And he's like, well, what's going to be the hang up? And he walked me through it, and it kind of helped me go, okay, well, I need to clarify these things. Same way with Lucy. It was nice to give to someone else that clarity and that reassurance of it's doable as long as you X, Y, Z every time.
So call Chad. Call Chad.
Call Chad. I got all the answers. And if I don't, I'll just BS you because I would BS the three.
Well, call Chad because he's a fantastic underwriter. So he's a great guy, very personable. He's a go-giver. If you have any issues with a deal that you're considering, he's a fantastic underwriter. He's been total rock star asset manager, and he's in the market that we love, Steven. He is in the Central Florida, Tampa market, and we all love that market for obvious reasons.
Yep. Thank you for being on the show today, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you guys. I appreciate the kind words.